Number 70.
Mr. Corla, I raised this question to get some answer on behalf of people who have been suffering stress and trauma and deprivation as a result of circumstances entirely outside their control, but entirely within the control of the Department of Social Protection.
Minister.
I'm proposing to take questions 70, 71 and 74 together, if that's okay.
Agreed.
Thank you, sir. Our department has experienced significant difficulties in processing illness benefit payments in recent times, and regrettably these difficulties have impacted a large number of people in a manner that has correctly been described as unacceptable. I want the House to know that the matter is a great deal of concern to both me and the department, and I'm extremely disappointed and embarrassed, I suppose, by our failure to maintain what is usually an exceptionally high standards of service from the people who work in the Department of Social Protection and Employment Affairs. The root of the difficulty lies in the transfer of the illness benefit scheme to our new core business objectives IT platform on the 4th of August, Count Corla, and the transfer had a number of objectives, including moving the illness benefit payments off a very old IT platform which is approaching its end of life to a newer IT platform which is already managing most of our other departments' payment schemes. We want to realise cost savings by eliminating the need for labour-intensive data entry and enable the reuse of existing data already on that business objectives platform, and facilitating in due course, with the cooperation obviously of our GPs, the move from a submission of paper medical certificates by people to one whereby an e-certificate is transmitted electronically from the GP to my department. Facilitating also in due course the move away from the certification each week by a GP to a system where a single certificate is provided to cover the entire illness period. The system changes had worked effectively for about 80% of the people who claim illness benefits, but a significant number of difficulties arose which affected payments to quite a number of people. The redesign of the medical certificate enabled the forms to be scanned rather than manually entered into our system. However, approximately 50% of the GP practices initially continued to submit old forms of the medical certificates, and this led to long delays in claim processing on the new system in early August. These delays were overcome by the department implementing an automatic certification process to ensure that people, including those whose GPs were not submitting the correct certificates, got paid. And while this process did ensure that people received their payments, it did result in approximately 15% of the recipients receiving a split payment in the period from September to November. People who received split payments were not underpaid as a consequence of this approach, but the total amount due to them was in accordance with their entitlement. But obviously they weren't expecting split payments. During this time, my department also deployed additional staff to process the old form certificates that were received from GP practices. And this allowed us to cease the auto-certification process in mid-October, and the issues of split payments has then since largely been resolved. Approximately 75% of medical certificates are now being received are in the correct new format, and the remaining forms are being processed manually on the day that we receive them. The removal of the auto-certificate process had belatedly exposed some underlying deficiencies in the design and the operation of our new illness benefit system. The main issue identified related to the transition from a payment in arrears approach, which was as we were with the old system, to a current week payment approach, i.e. from a system whereby people were paid their entitlement a week after they gave us their certificate, to one where they're paid during the week of certification, which is now the current practice. And this leaves very little tolerance for late receipt of certificates once a claim is in payment. And this is genuinely causing significant uncertainty for people. The new system has very tightly defined rules which must be satisfied before a claim and a certificate can be accepted and processed. And although these rules are very valid in principle, they are leading to payments being delayed for reasons that wouldn't have been applied under our legacy system. My department has taken 3 main steps to resolve the issues that I've just described. First, we've deployed additional staff to process the tasks and to respond to the inquiries arising from the tight application of the scheme's rules under the new system. Secondly, we have developed some new IT routines or workarounds that in effect build in a 7-day buffer to address the payment gap issue and to automate the processing of the tasks to ensure a faster flow-through of our payments. And thirdly, we are reviewing the design rules of the new system, including the payment in the current week rule, which will modify the system to give us greater flexibility in processing all of our claims and indeed our certificates. In addition, my department continues to engage with the medical professions teams regarding the implementation of our e-certification and our single close certifications. And these measures will in time lead, we very much hope, to an improved delivery service for our people. My department has also allocated additional managers to take responsibility for the programme of work that I've just set out. And this management team includes a full-time assistant secretary and an additional staff at principal, additional principal and higher executive level, officer level. As a consequence of the measures just described, people who are due a payment and whose certificates and claims are in order should now receive their payment entitlements. Payment volumes were restored to normal levels last week and are being monitored on a daily basis to ensure that they remain at this level. And any further issues that may arise will be quickly identified and further remedial action may be taken if and when they arise. In stating this, it is important to note that there are always cases, as were always such cases under our old system, where people's payments are legitimately stopped or paused for a variety of different reasons. These issues, or these types of issues, will always remain and will normally be dealt with under our helpline number. In addition to the system issues, my department acknowledges most sincerely that we did not communicate effectively with people in advance of our new system coming into effect, nor in the immediate post-implementation period. And whilst my Secretary-General did write to all of the people in receipt of illness benefits some weeks ago to apologise for the difficulties that they were experiencing and to advise of the supports available, this communication, I genuinely accept, was too little, too late and was of limited comfort to the people who were unduly distressed. Our experience with the illness benefit transfer has been a salutary reminder, I suppose, that the longer-term impact of short-term remedial actions, even those taken with the best of intentions when unanticipated issues arise or failures occur, must be carefully thought through before implementation. In order to ensure that the lessons are identified and learned from this experience, I and my Secretary-General have commissioned an independent review of this project, which will be undertaken by a retired Revenue Commissioner. I expect that it will be delivered to me by the end of the year, and its findings will inform our approach to all future systems and process changes. To conclude, Ceann-Comhairle, I've already said that my department sincerely regrets all of the distress that we have caused to our recipients of illness benefits over the last number of months,
Minister.
and we will endeavour to ensure that nothing like this ever happens in our department.
Deputy
I listened carefully to what the Minister said, and I appreciate what she has said, but you know, we have to bear in mind the fact that, first of all, a lot of the Minister's reply is couched in the past tense, as if this problem has now resolved itself. Well, I could show you my phone, Minister, if you want to look at it after this session. I have 5 queries today alone on my phone, let alone how many has gone to my office. So the problem is not resolved yet, and we must remember that this problem is going on now for 3 or 4 months. It started in August with the medical certificates, which were a new form of medical certificate demanded without any notice, any consultation, nothing, just out of the blue, whole new raft of information requested on the medical certificate. And then, when that seemed to be about to get resolved, the software problem kicked in. Now, what we have to bear in mind here is we are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in the country, people who are too sick or too disabled to work, and who are, in the vast majority of cases, solely dependent on their social welfare from week to week. And you know, we've all got the different stories and the different emails and the different instances of the sort of hardship this has caused in individual cases. So, you know, can I ask the Minister for an assurance that this is not going to recur on behalf of all those people? This is not going to recur. And can I also ask the Minister, is there any accountability here? I mean, I'm not looking for a head or anything like that, but I mean, surely somebody in the department took these decisions, which gave rise to all this hardship and all this anguish and pain. Has somebody spoken to those people to point out the error of their ways? Deputy Brady.
Minister, this has been an unmitigated mess for some of the most vulnerable people in the state, the sickest people in the state, looking for little more than their actual entitlements, their benefits, something that they paid into. They pay into the social insurance fund, hoping that that safety net would kick in when they needed it most, and it failed them. You know, and I hear the apology, and I hope people out there who have been messed up since August, running around from pillar to post trying to get money that they are entitled to. Communications was a major failure here between the department, recipients, between the department and community welfare officers around the state who some were stepping in to give payments, others weren't because they were stating that people weren't entitled to a payment because they had received a part payment. Accountability is key here, and I want to ask specifically around the consultants who rolled out this particular IT system. What accountability is there, because these issues were first identified, first raised back in August by myself. The Minister didn't act, you acknowledge yourself, action wasn't taken until October, where 3 different things were implemented by yourself. Serious questions need to be answered there, but I just want to ask, on a number of occasions, Minister, you have said, your department have said that anyone entitled to money has got money. That clearly isn't the case. You went on radio to say people would have been paid on Friday 2 weeks ago. That hasn't happened. Has everyone received money that they're entitled to at this moment in time? Have anyone that is due money from the department, have all of those underpayments been made? Can we have a figure? And also overpayments, because people did receive money that they weren't due. So there's serious concern. And what measures are being put in place to, people are fearful about those overpayments. So what measures are being put in place to deal with that?
Sometimes politicians exaggerate to make a particular point, but I will deliberately refrain from doing so. And let the contents of a letter, which some of us have received from a person who continues to serve this country, set out the role, because it's a very important role, and it speaks for everyone. And he says, I am close to a complete breakdown due to a system which is clearly even more overrun than it was prior to the changes. Changes which I'm guessing were introduced in an effort to improve an already trouble set up, which are a disaster. I would like to ask at this point if you may have been aware of these difficulties, and many of the population of this country are faced with. And if so, you might be willing to, or able to step in to attempt to rectify the endless and needless stresses which this puts on me, my family and many others throughout the country. What will it take in order for our services and systems to stop pushing already struggling and suffering citizens to despair and desperation? Is it going to take an example like this in Joe Duffy, or to highlight the mess the system is? I paid my taxes, made my contributions, and when I asked for a bit of help for the system, and this was a genuine case, I'm entitled to nothing. And this is an awful story. There's more to this. I cannot believe it. People were left hanging on phones. How many people were asked? How many additional people have you? Is this, Minister, I want to know, were officials in favour of this at all? What officials, was there a big change around in your department? And was that part of the problem? I mean, you're talking about appointments of this Assistant General Secretaries and everybody else. The very people, we left them high and dry. And this is an insurance-based system. They're entitled to their money. And don't be telling people to go down to the community welfare officer where it's means tested. And you sit looking in at it. It's not right, Ceann Comhairle. It's just not right. I have met people destitute. And I think it's a disgrace. And do not ever change a system. Why was it changed at all? Never change something that was doing all right. And it's the first time I ever got angry in a while. I'm not a minister whom I think is doing a good job. But, Minister, this was an utter failure. And I might have to say that, and it's rarely I say to use words like that. This was a shambles at the highest order.
Minister.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle, and thanks, deputies. I'm not standing here in front of anybody trying to justify any of the actions that happened over the last number of months. I have said it on a number of occasions, and I think why it's particularly so difficult to accept is because the level of service that's offered by the people in our department is exemplary, 99.9% of the time, and I think that's why this debacle was so difficult to try and explain. But I'm not talking in the past tense, Deputy OD, just to let you know, because in the last number of days we've issued over 50,000 payments. This week alone, and it's only Tuesday afternoon, we've issued 29,000 payments. And on average weekly tranche, we would have on average 50,000 people on illness benefit on any given week. This year, last year, the year before, next year. That's the expected payments that go out every week. To answer another question, yes, all arrears have been paid. And there may be cases where there are arrears still due. But we're using the business as usual manual processing for some of the old forms. It means that anybody that's awaiting arrears from an old forms payment will be paid those arrears this week. Ceann Comhairle, the calls to our helpline, and that's how I know arising from obviously the changes that we've made in the last number of weeks, that the vast majority of them have been successful, because the calls to our helpline have significantly reduced and are right back now down to normal levels, where there are, and I said this earlier on and I repeat it again, there are always going to be cases where people are either refused an illness payment because, number one, they're not entitled to it, or number two, that the medical certificate wasn't filled out correctly or might have had a wrong date, or number three, that it missed a payment. There always will be a small number of issues with regard to some of the 50,000 weekly payments that come in. But that was true of the old system and it's true in the new system. But with regard to the changes that we've made, the first change that was made, Deputy Brady, was made in August. And the reason that change had to be made was because only some 50% of our doctors were using the new form. Now, I totally acknowledge and accept that that again was our fault and a lack of communications with the doctors. We have learned so much and have still probably to identify things that we have to learn, and I hope to do that from the Revenue Commissioner's independent audit. But the only thing I can genuinely do is to sincerely apologise to the people who we have distressed over the last couple of months, to tell you that it was never our intentions, was trying to bring improvements into a system. We did genuinely upset people, Count Corley. It wasn't our intention, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't
Okay,
happen.
final round of 1 minute. EOD.
Now, if the Minister assures me that the problem is sort of fizzling out and that most people are being accommodated, I accept that, but I'm still getting quite a number of queries. And in relation to what you say about all arrears being paid, that may be what you're being told by the Department, but it certainly doesn't tally with the information I'm getting from my constituents. However, I accept that the Minister doesn't seek to justify what happened, and I accept that she doesn't stand over it. But I return to a question I asked earlier. Is there anybody going to be made accountable? I mean, even in the sense of being spoken to, being remonstrated with? I mean, if there were consultants involved, as somebody said, in the installation of this software, I mean, what are the prospects? Have they been employed again by the government, or have they been spoken to? And what about the officials, you know, who obviously signed off on the new medical certificates last August without any notification or any advance notice to anybody?
You say everyone has received any payments they're due. Now, I was talking to numerous people yesterday, numerous people today. One woman yesterday told me 6 weeks she hasn't got a payment. 6 weeks. And this is a new applicant. Another woman I was speaking to, she was out sick. She's actually back in work now and still hasn't received a payment. So there's huge issues there. And accountability. Yes, there were consultants here. You know, and I'd love to see what remit, what terms of reference the consultants were given in and around training, because certainly there was deficits there in terms of training for staff expected within the department to actually administer and deal with this. And that's no reflection on the staff, who've been put under massive amounts of pressure because of the rollout of this system, which seems it was doomed from day one. Now, at committee, the Secretary-General told us that this platform, this IT, is due to be rolled out for one-parent family payment and for job seekers also. So this independent review is going to be critical. So I was given a commitment that the terms of reference will be circulated in relation to that independent review. We need to get that, but also that review is made public and that is actually scrutinised, because there needs to be lessons learned from this, because the people who have been affected unnecessarily, that needs never to happen again to anyone that's entitled to funding and a safety net from this state.
Yeah. Minister, I think you would agree that it's not acceptable for somebody to be left holding on for 90 minutes when they get on the phone. That is not good enough. Is it a position, because there were staff inside in social protection work very hard, and I concur with you, because I saw them working and I know they work very hard. But if you do not put enough of people manning the lines, or women on the lines, women do an awful lot of this good work, you're in trouble. And so therefore that's the problem. And the other issue that is, this system, can I ask you, surely to God you're not intending to roll out this system to any further payments after this fiasco, until this report comes clear, and that we get an opportunity to examine that report here and scrutinise it and invigilate, so as to ensure that all the mess that was made of this, and Deputy Brady and Deputy D is correct, we're paying out multi-thousands of consultants and everybody else. We'd be better off maybe if you allowed your own people to work within their own system and maybe make modifications to ensure that it complies with modern day standards. But I will certainly be anti any rollout of any further thing else until this thing is sorted out.
Thanks, gents. So the first thing I'll say about the independent review is the terms of reference I understood were given to the JOC last week. If they weren't, Johnny, I'll get them for you, but there's no problem in sharing them. I'm not doing the review to keep it a secret, and you're more than welcome for us to come back and say to the JOC so that we can all learn effectively together. But the most important thing for me, and it can be published, there's nothing to hide, the most important reason for doing it is that we learn why went wrong, and how we did or didn't affect it, and ensure that it never happens again. So once the report comes back to us, I'm quite happy to come to the committee and to talk about it and to glean from your advice and your suggestions too. Deputy Penrose, we are obviously going to move our other schemes from an old system to the new system. Because the old system is creaking, and it is so old, it's around for probably 40 or 50 years old, and it's on its last legs. It needs to be moved to the new system. But I can absolutely and categorically assure you that any plans that we have been put on hold until we learn from this particular rollout all of the lessons that we need to learn and to make sure that they don't happen again. Deputy OD, there's nothing wrong with the medical certificates. I know you think that there is, and that caused the problem. Yeah, but actually, again, and it's not, again, there's nothing wrong with the new medical certificates. And of the doctors who used the new medical certificates were the people of the 80% who didn't get affected. So, in effect, the system, had it gone the way it was supposed to go, would have worked. But it gave rise, obviously, to other anomalies that we didn't recognise because of the changes that we had to make around the response to the people who were using the old medical systems. Now, that's our fault. That's nobody else's fault. The miscommunication is our fault. It's nobody else's fault. And again, it's a part of the learning process that we'll make sure we improve our communications. And just very finally, Count Corlett, to say, Johnny, I recognise that our staff were put under incredible pressure. I totally recognise that they have come and told us that there were deficits within the training programmes that were given to them. I think that the training was probably as good as it could have been, but when people tell you it needed to be better, then you have to listen to that and take that on board. Deputy Penrose, to tell you, the normal amount of calls that come into this department every day are about 1,000 a day. It went up to 12,000 a day. I genuinely don't know where I would have got the staff to be able to turn around the kind of service that is given on a daily basis, but I hear what you're saying. I genuinely do. And just very, very finally, Count Corlett, sorry for annoying you. Deputy Brady, if you have a lady that hasn't received a payment for 6 weeks, this is not the reason she hasn't received a payment. And if you bring me her details and her PPS number, I'll resolve that issue today.
Thank you, Minister. Question number 6. Minister.
Thanks, Count Corlett. The Deputy is aware, I think, from previous questions on this matter that my department is working on a review of the maintenance and liable relative procedures insofar as they relate to payment schemes operated by the Department of Social Welfare. From a broader perspective, the wider issues relating to maintenance, including the establishment of a child maintenance service to assist lone parents, are a matter for my colleague Charlie Flanagan, Minister for Justice and Equality, who has responsibility of the Family Law Act, which governs maintenance requirements. The Family Law Act places legal obligations on parents to maintain their children, and in cases where the family unit has broken down, these obligations continue to apply. Relevant maintenance payments can be arranged either directly between the parties themselves or with the assistance of supports from the Department of Justice and Equality, such as the Family Mediation Service, the Legal Aid Board, or ultimately through the courts. With regard to the work that's going on in my own department, the preliminary stages of the internal review that we were carrying out have now been concluded, and my officials will attend meeting with the Department of Justice and Equality officials with a view to ascertaining their views and jointly considering our next steps in relation to family maintenance arrangements. And the meeting has been scheduled for later this month.
Obviously, thank you for your response in relation to the setting up of a separate statutory agency with independent powers to pursue maintenance on behalf of very often vulnerable people. But there is a maintenance recovery unit, is there not, within the department at present? There's a maintenance recovery system which only applies to lone parents where the child is under the age of 7. Why hasn't that been extended in tandem with the changes in the lone parent allowance regulations? When the child is over 7, you're still a lone parent. You get a different type of payment, job seekers transition as opposed to lone parent allowance. But there seems to be a logical reason why that system doesn't apply equally to somebody who's in the job seekers transition on the basis that they're a single parent.
Minister.
I kind of tend to agree with you. But I'm not sure whether we should expand it or whether we should do away with it. Because I'm not sure it's our job in the Department of Social Welfare to chase errant parents. Now, it's definitely somebody's job, but I'm totally against penalising, and in the main, it's women for not chasing the errant partner for looking after their children. So that's where I'm at the moment. I have a number of ideas in my head as to what should happen if the world was perfect, but some of them fall under my remit and some of them don't, and that's what's going to be discussed at the meeting later on this month. So once that meeting is held, maybe we can come back and have a further conversation about what might be best suited going forward, if that's okay with you.
Just a question of the department chasing errant parents. I mean, it's a question of combating poverty. I mean, the poverty statistics, as the Minister will be aware, amongst lone parents are particularly stark. Now, you'll find that in many cases, somebody is not in a position to go to court because the other partner is violent or whatever, you know. And even when they do go to court and they don't get paid, the department tends to assess them for maintenance, which the court has granted them, but which they're not being paid. Well, if that has changed, Minister, the change must have been very recent, because as far as I can see, it's still the position. I mean, you know, isn't that, if somebody is in that situation, they obviously won't want to take the risk of getting an order for maintenance, which they feel sure isn't going to be paid, and have it assessed against any lone parent allowance they'll be getting. So, you know, as I say, generally speaking, it's not a question of I mean, the lone parent allowance is not going to make anybody rich, and it's not, in its present form, it's not going to do much to combat the present levels of poverty among single parents. But if they were able to get maintenance in addition, it would certainly combat poverty in an area where poverty is particularly prevalent.
Minister, to conclude.
All I'd say to you is that whether we expand or downgrade our liable relatives division has no impact on a parent's poverty whatsoever, because the payment that's issued to the parent is on the basis of that parent's circumstances. If they get maintenance, there's a very generous maintenance disregard. If they don't get maintenance, it's not included in our assessment. They don't get it, and we compensate for the fact that they don't get it. Where I have the issue, and that is as it should be, the department is here to look after people who are in vulnerable positions. If they get money towards maintenance, there's a generous disregard. If they don't get money, it's up to the state to make sure that that family has a minimum standard of living. Where I need to square the circle is whether it's the Department of Social Protection's legal responsibility to chase errant parents, or whether it should be some other arm of the state, or maybe a collective, you know, authority from both Departments of Justice and ourselves. I'm not sure, but until I figure that out, I'm not going to put any woman, and it's in the main women, in a vulnerable position of having to chase somebody so that she can qualify for a payment of our department. That's not the way it should be, and it's not the way it is now.
Question 73 is Deputy John Brady again.
I want to ask why people are being referred to JobPath for a second time, having already completed the scheme in full, and you know, people being sent a second time. Can I ask how many people have been referred over at this stage, and the costs incurred?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Deputy. JobsPath is one of our more successful activation services, which supports people who are long-term unemployed to secure and sustain full-time paid employment. Job seekers are referred to the service by means of a selection process, and a person who has previously completed a year with JobsPath is referred back to our Intrio case officers in-house, so to speak. If after 6 months they haven't found sustainable employment, or are not engaged in education, training, or in any employment supports, other employment supports that we offer, they may be randomly reselected to go back on JobsPath. Job seekers referred for a second time will start working with the personal advisor again, who will review their development during the previous time with the service, and together they will prepare a new personal progression plan to build on that progress. The actions and the tasks agreed will be based on their previous engagement, with particular focus on the identified barriers which had prevented the person moving into full-time suitable employment during the previous 12-month stint. Since 2015, over 193,000 job seekers have engaged with JobsPath, and of these, 15,000 people have been referred to the service for a second time. JobPath providers receive a registration fee each time they register a job seeker for the service, and the balance of their fees are paid subject to their clients achieving sustained full-time employment for a minimum of 13 weeks. There's no separate costing structure for job seekers who are referred to the service a second time, and the Department does not release details of the fees paid to JobPath providers, as they're commercially sensitive and to do so could place the state at a disadvantage in both the terms of the contracts currently in place and in particular any future procurement that may be undertaken in this area.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Brady.
Minister, I have to say, I mean, these two private companies, Thurles New and CTEC, they must be rubbing their hands and laughing with glee. I think you gave the answer there, that they are actually getting paid a second time for people signing the personal progression plan. So can I get the actual figure around that? How much is being paid out for the 15,000 people which now have been referred over a second time? I also want to ask what difference there is in relation to the training in the first stint, which obviously didn't work, in finding the 15,000 people jobs. What's the difference in the training? Because I've spoken to a lot of people who have been referred over now a second time, and they're saying they're doing the exact same things a second time round. Learning how to write a CV and engaging in other meaningless tasks, being put in front of a computer and told to go and find yourself a job. So it didn't work the first time round, and it certainly didn't work the second time round. So can I get the figures around that? Because this commercial sensitivity doesn't wash. It's costing us millions. There's clearly issues there that I've raised with you on many occasions.
Minister.
Councillor, the Deputy has a real ideological problem with JobsPath. To answer your question, what's interesting is that the vast majority of reps that I get from TDs in this House are to ask me to directly intervene with people who are on CE schemes for a number of years, who desperately want to stay on the CE schemes for a number more years. And that is too one of our successful application or activation processes. And indeed, a large number of members from your own party, Deputy, have come to me and asked me specifically to intervene to allow people to stay for longer periods on CE and our activation processes than would normally be allowed. And yet you have a problem with probably the most successful activation scheme and process that we have ever done. I'm answering your question, so you don't like the answer, that's
Deputy,
fine.
hold on.
This is the most successful activation programme that we have ever run in the history of this state. Ever. And you have a problem with people getting a second chance at it, but you don't have a problem with people getting a second chance on CE or TUS. I think that's incredible. Cancora, this works. The reason we send people back for a second time is because they want to go back. They want to actually work. Despite the recommendations or the protestations that Sinn Féin make, the people who are on the live register actively want to work and want to avail of the assistance of the state, of any arm of the state, in order to help them get a full-time job.
Deputy Brady, to conclude, please.
Minister, myself and yourself will probably never see eye to eye in relation to the privatisation of the sector. And as I said, these two companies, they're rubbing their hands with glee, but you failed to answer the questions that I put to you in relation to the actual training that a person referred a second time around. What is the difference between the first time and the second time? I'll tell you what the difference is. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing whatsoever. I want to ask the Minister a question in relation to the contracts that were signed with these two private companies, as to whether there is a responsibility on the state, on the department, to continue to feeding agreed numbers to these two companies until the contract actually expires. So if the Minister could answer that, because I think yous are running out of people to feed this monster that yous have created, and yous are obliged by the contract in which yous have engaged in to continue to feed, and that's why those 15,000 people have been referred. And I could show you dozens of cases where people do not want to be, they feel their time is being wasted by being referred a second time around. So that, what you're saying, people want to go, that is not true, Minister.
Time is up.
Carla, we've done, or are in the process of conducting an econometric review of the Job Path Service in collaboration with the OECD, so that actually I can have factual data to have these kind of conversations, because Deputy Brady brings anecdotal evidence every time we have oral questions here as to how desperate people are treated on Jobs Path. Yet it is undoubtedly one of the most successful activation programmes that we have ever used in the history of the state. I'd love to say we were running out of people to send JobsPath, and I'm really so pleased that our employment numbers, our unemployment numbers, are now sub 200,000. But there's still 200,000 people, Deputy Brady, in this country who have no work, who want to work, who want to avail of the assistance of any arm of the state that will train them, give them education, give them experience, and assist them in getting a full-time job. You are ideologically opposed. You would rather see people on the ground living on €198 a week. That was what keeps you happy. I have no idea of why you feel that
Deputy
way.
Brady, please.
The people that we are
Let's hear the
supporting are getting full-time jobs, and yes, thankfully, the numbers are coming down.
Thank
but
you,
198,000 people on the live register, we're far from running out of people getting into jobs.
Thank you, Minister. Time's up. Question number